Tadge Juechter, for the people who don't know me. I'm the chief engineer for the Corvette. Okay, a lot of that comes from the technology we put in the car. A lot of it introduced last year, because like I said, we've designed this car fundamentally towards this goal, towards this pinnacle car, the Z06. Everything from the way the chassis is developed, the aluminum structure, the aerodynamics, where we spend a lot of time using the tools from the race team to hone the aerodynamics, extremely important. And this car has enormous amounts of downforce, far more than we measured on any other car. That's part of the reason it's very confident to drive. Use of materials throughout the car, make it very light, very stiff. Tech transfer from racing all over the car. Even the PDR itself is a tech transfer story, from the way the race team looks to find time, analyze driver performance. It's the exact same kind of thing that you're able to buy out of the factory. Tires, I'll talk about Lee Willard here in a minute, and it's one of the things you'll want to talk about. He's right here. Talk to him about is the tech transfer from racing getting into these tires. I want to talk a little bit more about racing, because racing is really important to us. A lot of people use racing just as marketing speak. You know, everything's racing inspired. For us, it's not racing inspired, it's racing reality. It's taking the real race hardware and saying how much of it can we put into the street car to make the best possible street car we can, which in turn turns into the best possible basis for the next generation race car. And that's what we've been doing for 3 generations of cars, starting with the 5th generation Corvette. We returned to endurance racing back in 1999, and we've been arguably one of the most successful race programs in racing history, any kind of racing. Consistently there since 1999, 94 class victories, stayed consistent all the way through the 5th generation, 6th generation, and out of the box, the 7th generation, based on this Z06, which the race team described as the perfect starting point. Optimally, everything about the car, the way its geometry, its proportions, the surfacing, was such a good starting point. They really had very little to do to start to develop the race car. And when you look at the race car and you park them side by side, you can see how similar they are. And for the first time in history, the race team didn't start with a car that was terrible from a lift standpoint and have to focus all their attention on getting some downforce. This is the first time in history where they started with a car and they actually had to worry about drag. They already had so much downforce in the car, they started thinking, you know, how can we get higher straightaway speeds? Maybe we should work on drag reduction, which is a first for the race team. So right out of the box, C7R, 4 wins in the first 11 races, more than any other manufacturers, who are off to an extremely good start and expect us to be very consistent in the race series. So that's kind of the overview. I want to let the experts talk more in detail, but I really wanted to call out who's talking about what. Kirk Benyon, who's right over here. He's our exterior design manager. He can talk to, he's the guy who spends all the nights, because a lot of time it's nights, 0 shift, so the middle of the night, midnight to 8 a.m. the next morning. He spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel, balancing the aesthetic and the functional needs for the car, as well as the packaging needs, cooling needs, all sorts of things have to be balanced. Extremely challenging to do a very good-looking car that also does that functionality. Kirk's the perfect guy to do that. You know, fantastic designer. Also very at home on a track as a driving instructor, so he's got the form and function down perfectly. So in addition to Kirk, you know, we can't talk about this car without talking about the heart of the beast. I went through my whole presentation. I didn't even talk about horsepower. I just talked about the performance, but the engine is a very stout piece, is an understatement. Even though it's packaged about the same size as the base engine, it's probably the lightest, smallest 650 horsepower engine out there, especially one that produces 650 foot-pounds of torque. Enormous technology in this small block engine. Dustin Gardner is over here to answer any questions you have about that. In terms of transmissions, the rest of the driveline, when you look at 650 horsepower cars around the world, typically you find a single paddle shifting transmission solution. No traditional 3-pedal manual transmission. We still do both. We do a fantastic 7-speed rev match manual transmission. Very engaging driving experience. Many of us love it. That's the way we were born to drive. And then we have an all-new 8-speed automatic paddle shift, lightning fast shifts. And when you get out there on the track, you can just set it in drive and let it shift for itself. Just to do that tomorrow and experience that, it's kind of mind-blowing how well that works. Jeff Paladin, right here, can answer any questions you have about the transmissions. I already showed you the performance data recorder. We wouldn't have a performance data recorder if it wasn't for Harlan Charles, our program product manager. Harlan is kind of the voice of the customer. He doesn't just do PDR, he does all aspects of defining the Corvette kind of from the customer's perspective. But he's here today to take you through a demonstration of PDR and answer any questions you got about that. Okay, chassis controls. You know, it's one thing to have a bunch of hardware. You can even have first-rate hardware on the car, but unless you integrate everything and make everything work together, the car won't be very good. You can have absolutely the best individual components, but unless they blend together, the driving experience won't be very good. And that's something we focus on very intently. To be honest, some of that was probably based on our history. As General Motors headed towards bankruptcy, we didn't have a lot of money to buy the best hardware. We actually had to learn to make the best out of what we could afford. And so we developed a really good capability for maximizing the capability of any hardware set. Now, for this car, we have nothing but the best. And we're putting on top of that our ability to integrate that stuff together to make a car that comes across as completely one piece, like one person designed the whole thing. From the driver's seat, it feels completely integrated, even though there's millions or billions of digital calculations going on in the car. Putting that all together is our development group's job. We have Alex McDonald back here and Chris Barber to talk to you about at least the ELSD and other content that goes into the chassis controls, as well as all the other ride modes that you can use in the car. And then finally, a couple of key partners we have here today. Brembo, maker of the best brakes in the world. We have standard iron brakes on this car, and then ceramics, you know, world best brakes, ceramic brakes. We have Benjamin Pohl back here in the back to talk about brakes. I talked about the braking distance. You know, it's a combination of their hardware, and the next guy I'll talk about, the Michelin tires, along with the integration of Alex and Chris. It's all of that stuff working together that gets you the performance that you see. You'll find Brembo brakes and Michelin tires on almost all of the elite competition around the world, but we're putting to the best use here to get the best performance. So Michelin, Lee Willard, I mentioned, and he's ably assisted by Jim Knowles back here to talk to you about the tires, the partnership that we have with General Motors. Lee is the embodiment of tech transfer, doing the race tires for the C7R and the street tires for the Corvette. Is the perfect way to have a single individual do that technology transfer from racing to street tires. So.